Welcome everyone to day 2 of the ATS trade show. The theme of today is talking about scaling automation, and I'm very happy to be talking to you today about the topic from zero to lights out and how we get started on that path to automation. The agenda for today is just to do a short introduction. I'll talk a little bit about myself and ATS, and then we'll jump into a framework that we can use about how to get started and get ready, and then discuss the return on investment criteria that really help us to pave the way to more automation within our facilities. So first things first, I would always recommend, no matter what it is that you're trying to do, if it's a project, a new business strategy, or even something in your own personal life that's new, before you jump in the pool, you got to start with why. What is the reason that you're looking at automating inside of your business? And really define that and write it down. Writing it down really starts to make things real, but always, always, always start with the why you are making this new venture, this new jump, this new project. And today, when we travel around, we talk to many of the different partners in the world, it often comes back to, I can't hire enough people. And that's regardless of industry and regardless of geography. It's getting harder and harder to find people to staff the positions that are required to grow our businesses in the way that we want to. And that's, the first example was warehouse workers, but I can cite you a study or an expert or a thought leader, a news story across a variety of industries and workspaces. There's trade workers, the restaurant industry, there's manufacturing by Deloitte, very famous study, I cite it often. So it really doesn't matter where you are or what you're working in. This is something that we're dealing with, and we hear about it a lot. Now, in doing the research for this talk, the interesting thing around the drivers for automation is that, McKinsey did a study in 2018 that the driver for automation and the response to the labor shortage was about 8th down the list. And so the point there is your why could be any one of these that are on, that are important to your business, because there are many drivers to automation. And the most important thing is quantifying the one that matters to you. And that will help you get started. So for anybody who doesn't know ATS is one of the largest custom automation suppliers in the world. We're fortunate to have 23 manufacturing facilities, over 50 engineering offices globally, and about 4,500 employees. But more importantly to the talk today, it means that we've deployed and integrated over 23,000 custom automation solutions. And along the way, you learn a few things. So I'm the Director of Linear Motion Technologies. I've been with the company for over 10 years now in a variety of roles, and actually a variety of business units that are focused on different industries. Outside of that, I've been fortunate to work with local startup accelerators, local startup companies in their scale-up, as well as been fortunate to win a couple of awards, as I've been serving in different roles and different teams. And I think that's the best indication of that I've been able to work with some really great people and work as part of some really great teams. I've been fortunate enough to travel around and speak to a number of people like you about their automation problems. And that's about trying to take technology and apply it to a problem that is unique and dynamic to you and your business. And that's something that is near and dear to my heart. I'm quite passionate about it. So Linear Motion Technologies inside of ATS, that's largely our SuperTrack brand and what we do around SuperTrack. It's something we're very proud of and call it the crown jewel of our product family. And SuperTrack makes up the foundation of a lot of world-class manufacturing cells. It is by no means an exaggeration to say SuperTrack is at the foundation of some of the most complex and highest performing automation on the planet. And I'm fortunate enough to lead that business unit, and that drives really interesting discussions about solving real business problems with the latest technology available on the market. So with that background and my role inside of ATS, what ATS does, where do we start? Where do we get started on this journey towards automation? I happen to read a lot. Stephen Covey, very famous author, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I love number 2. begin with the end in mind. If you don't have a clear picture of what it is that you want to accomplish, and whether that's the end of the day tomorrow, the end of the week, or the end of the next 10 years, if you don't have a really clear picture of what that is, regardless of automation, merger of technology, it's very difficult to push towards that. And so make sure that you have a concrete and crystal clear definition of what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your business. Start with why, and then create that end picture of what it is that you're trying to do. And so we walk into a number of partners, and the idea is you've got a growing organization trying to scale manufacturing or scale operations or scale logistics. We want to automate everything. And this is one of my favorite quotes, as I talk. And the factory of the future will have 2 employees, a man and a dog. And the man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. And it's kind of a funny play on this factory of the future, and even the title of the presentation around From Zero to Lights Out. The idea is often to get the lights out as quickly as possible. But it doesn't always work that way. Automation itself, no matter if we're talking software automation for the sales team, procurement automation for supply chain, or physical robotic automation for process manufacturing, it's a process in and of itself, and it requires that development and that investment in infrastructure to make sure that we're getting the return on the effort we're putting in to make that investment and make that integration and change to our business. We talk about this a lot because what do you get when you automate a bad process? So automation has almost limitless potential and can be a great enabler for growth inside of a business. But when you apply automation to a bad process, all you do is you pour gas on that fire. You make that process even worse. And all the benefits that automation can bring for making things faster and more efficient, if you make things faster and more efficient inside of a bad process, all you do is accentuate the bad. And so it's really important that when we choose to automate, no matter what it is, that we've got a sound understanding of that process and we move forward from that initial first step. So on our path, from start to finish, where we are today to where we're fully automated, step 1 is really around that foundational analysis of the process itself and correctly identifying all the inputs and outputs. And if we tie back to that study from the beginning, this process definition in and of itself has the ability to reduce cost, which is oftentimes the largest driver of automation to begin with. So you're still progressing on your journey towards automation. You're very highly likely to increase productivity just through the analysis itself. And then you're starting to lay that groundwork for the new applications and enabling what you're doing with new technologies. So what's more important, I think, about these steps, again, from our journey from start to finish, is, well, when do we move on? When do we move on from step 1 and just analyzing the process? Is this a continuous, I never get out of the cycle? Because, well, we want to invest in automation. We want that factory of the future with, a man and a dog. And you move on when you've exhausted all practical improvement. And I really like the word practical because practical is defined by you. You can only spend so much time on a process as exists today because you probably know that it's not able to support the business objectives that you're trying to achieve. But practical is very much dependent on the business itself, what resources are available to you, what time frame that you're working within. But that analysis of the process, what it will do is confirm that a new approach is needed. And once you know the new approach is needed, then we can move on. The second one is that you want to remove any bottlenecks that are within that process. And this goes back to the definition of what happens when you automate a bad process. So if you automate a process that has significant bottlenecks, you're just going to get to the bottlenecks faster. So identify what they are so that when you add technology, you know what approach you need to take to that challenge area that already exists. And then the last thing, and I like this one because once you've reviewed your process, you know what, or at least you have an idea of what future state looks like, that, start with the end in mind. You really want to decide if your finish line is centralized or decentralized manufacturing. Because that decision between centralization and decentralization, and I said manufacturing, but it doesn't apply just to that, it defines your approach to implementation of technology. So a centralized approach and a decentralized approach would open up different paths for you. It's a bit of a fork in the road. And that really comes out of the analysis of your process in step one. So after we're done step one, we've hit on the 3 criteria of when to move on. Now it's about really focusing in, because we're about to make an investment into making something better. And we want to make sure that we do it right. So step 2 is about taking that data and analyzing it and making sure that we've got verification steps at each one of the inputs and outputs of that process that we've just defined. And the reason for that, it's critical infrastructure once you start to add automation. Because people are inherently very flexible, and as you define their work and people are doing whatever it is within that process, whatever process step, if something goes wrong, people adapt, people adjust, people are very agile. But once you've integrated a piece of technology, some of that agility goes away. Therefore, your need for verification goes up. And so inside of process 2, you want to make sure that you're acquiring data at the right steps in your process to support the implemented change that you want to make. And so again, just even by doing this and going through this analysis, it's still progressing us on our journey from where we are today, from 0 to lights out. Because we're still working to improve our quality as we add these verification points. We're improving the capability of any technology that we do actually have inside the processes that exist today. And then again, we're starting to open up those new applications in production that require different pieces of technology. Because now we know what the process is and we know what the validation points are, so we have our definition of success. And now it makes sense to start turning the technology crank. And this is when we start to add the robots. So inside of step 3, and I like this picture because it has a number of robots around a fairly straightforward conveyor. And this would probably be a good example of what not to do, despite the fact that it's a neat picture itself. But your return on investment, if your integration looks something like this, you might not have done the best job of step 1 and step 2. But let's start talking about step 3, which for me, it's automate. But automate might also mean augment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what that really means to me is that you start adding technology where it makes sense. And now you have the information and the knowledge to know exactly where it makes sense. You have your process defined, and you've got those validation points and verification points. So now we just continue to adapt and grow and change as our reasons, any one of the reasons from the study, make sense to our business. So when do you move on from the automate phase? And this is the interesting point, is that even if we get to the point of we have a man and a dog in a facility and we're completely lights out, you never really move on from the automation phase. There's always room for improvement and continuous improvement. So we never move on from stage 3. You actually never really reach that finish line, that destination. It's just going to change and adapt with your business because your needs change and adapt. And what that's going to mean is that we'll have just a different mix of technologies that we're using to solve the challenges that we have. Now, a lot of this when to move on, and I just wanted to mention that moving on is about continuously integrating more technology, continuously getting better and improving. And a lot of that is reliant on the readiness of the business. And that's why step 1 and step 2 are so important, because as you progress through the analysis of that process, as you put that information in place, your team, yourself, you're getting ready to accept that technology, and your probability of successful implementation goes up significantly. And that just won't change. You'll continue to go through step 1 and step 2. You'll define new processes. You'll put more information in place. You'll add verification points because you want to continue to accept new technology and continue to shift that mix on your floor until you ultimately reach whatever end destination you have in mind. Now, something that's really important to me, and especially when walking into those discussions that I referenced during the introduction, talking with different partners throughout the world, is automation can take many forms. We have a specific definition inside of our team and then inside of our broader team, but that doesn't mean it's the definition for you. Automation can mean a lot of different things, and that's okay. So, easiest framework, at least in my mind, to talk about automation is, we have a manual workforce, and it is rare throughout the world that you would not walk through a facility and not see some sort of technology merger with that manual process. We're consistently trying to invest to make our team members more efficient, more comfortable, so there's some merger of people and technology in that one phase. We've seen a significant rise in the amount of solutions that are semi-automated with the implementation of collaborative technologies, the success of collaborative robotics, in that middle space of merging people and technology in automated processes and manual processes. And then the third stage is that lights out stage, that fully automated process where people are responsible maybe for inputs and outputs and maybe not. But everything in between is fully automated with robotics, vision, processing equipment that I would classify as fully automated. And so the natural next question is, well, how do I know what's right for me? And when do I go? When do I stop? When do I slow down and use some caution? And this is where, once you've done step one and step two and you find yourself in the implementation of technology phase, it really comes back to the business case. It comes back to ROI. And ROI, at least in our world, typically has three drivers, and they're listed here. So throughput, quality, and availability of the process itself. And those align very well with sort of industry standard overall equipment effectiveness, OEE, but they're the direct line between the improvement that we're striving to make with how we've defined our project and the bottom line of the business, which, that in the end will drive what we're able to spend on the new technology. So, not to oversimplify the business case, we talk about three main drivers, but there are more, and the secondary drivers can become very important as well, and then there are ideas to extend that value. So in our world, usually volume is the primary driver of investment in technology and automation. But across that, you could be just scaling up, and that might mean your labor demands are a little bit higher, or maybe that ramp is too quick to ramp the manual process, and we need to invest in technology. It might be that the product mix is changing and getting very high, and that's introducing other complexities. And then inside the volume, the extending is about being able to redeploy the asset. And this comes into play when we don't really know exactly what the product mix is going to look like. We might not know exactly what the volume is going to be for a particular product. And if we can redeploy that capital asset, the return on investment gets higher. And if we look across the quality row, so quality is about repeatability of the process. As long as we're able to do the same thing over and over again, quite often the process is predictable. And when it's predictable, you can adjust your quality levels up and down. Quality is really impacted by the material cost of a product. So if you're, manufacturing a piece of paper on one end of the spectrum and a chunk of diamond on the other end, your level of investment in technology in order to do that successfully and repeatably is very different. And then the cost of poor quality, especially in my world, is very high. When you're working with medical devices and anything to do with life sciences, a cost of a mistake could mean a human life. And therefore, the level of investment, the level of technology, the level of process verification is very different than in other industries. And then the bottom row is the availability piece. And availability is about keeping the process running. And so keeping the process running is where, can we get enough people? Can we get enough space to do that? And that's really where the total cost of ownership comes into the return on investment for that implementation or integration of technology. So let's get to a couple of examples, my favorite part of the talk. So when we work with a number of different partners, we're usually trying to do something different, something unique to our business. And so we thought we'd talk through a couple of examples. And the first one is about product development. So we're in the middle of launching a new product. The product isn't quite ready for market yet. We might be doing some validation, some verification, depending on industry. So what are we doing? Throughput's really important to us. We're in this scaling up mode. And then for this particular example, they're in life sciences, therefore cost to poor quality is very high. And depending on the level of technology and the types of technology, foundational standards that you invest in, something like this is possible in today's automation world, where you invest in foundational technology for manual process development, and then you actually scale that technology all the way through the process from development through high volume, and you get to add automation as you need it. And from an ROI perspective, this is an ideal scenario for a customer who can invest in technology work, manually develop the process while we're doing that process definition, while we're defining the verification steps. Then we move to verification and move to semi-autonomous. That's when we've done our first investment in technology. And so in this specific example, that verification step was for clinical trials and a 6 parts per minute machine. So fairly low rate, at least in the ATS world. And the interesting thing was where you see that blue square, we had 2 people working directly, semi-autonomous solution, working directly with the technology because that step wasn't quite defined yet. It wasn't quite ready. It didn't know exactly what the definition of success was. So it didn't make sense to automate yet. Then, went through verification, started into the market, extended the piece of technology out, duplicated the parts of the cell and the process equipment that we could, and then actually invested in a fully automated solution. So you see the people come away. Now, with market success, volumes go up, volume being a primary driver of investment in technology. Phase 4 was that full automation system, 140 parts per minute. And you can see all the different colors are where we started to duplicate more equipment to be able to make rate. Because typically as speed goes up, complexity goes up as well. And that's where you need a little bit more technology, a little bit more verification steps. So as a second example, a lot of the partners that we work with, this is pretty common, we want to scale. Our business is going very well, our volumes are increasing, and we've got to work to change our process, whether that's manufacturing or other, and it's got to work to scale with our business. So we're scaling up. Something that would be great is redeployment value of the technology because, if for whatever reason something doesn't go the way that we want, we've got to shift. We want to maintain a level of flexibility, and because we're ramping so fast, labor is really hard to find. And even if we could find it, getting people ramped into the process could be challenging as well. So technology will provide the return on investment. We're ready to go. So I wanted to walk through an example that we have at ATS that's it's interesting because of the speed at which we were able to do things. But in order to sort of understand how we were able to accomplish it, I wanted to talk about the normal approach. So the normal approach when you're scaling really fast is to invest in lean cells. Lean cells are basically the boxes that you would see across, and you use people to move product between or to process in between the lean cells that you're able to invest in. It's pretty similar to the first example that we walked through, where the people are doing the things that aren't quite defined, and the cells are the more standard or more well-defined parts of the process. This is a really normal approach as we see partners throughout the world. It offers a lot of flexibility. The challenge is it increases footprint. And so this takes up a lot more space than is often required for a fully automated cell. And so what we normally do is, and why we like the SuperTrack product so much, is that rather than connecting with people, we'll connect to a highly intelligent smart conveyance product, which is our SuperTrack. And why that's powerful is SuperTrack offers independent shuttle control. And once you have independent shuttle control, it changes the way that you design a cell. Because you no longer have to be worried about line balancing. Traditional conveyance, you need to worry about fixed indexing, both time and space. So when you take that away, it changes the way that you design the piece of automation. And what that does is it allows us to take those lean cells and essentially locate them around a piece of automation to take the people out of the process. But what that does is it allows for a lot more flexibility around redeployment. And where we see that is on our integration floor. You know, we've designed something, worked really well in design or worked really well in simulation. Once we got it to the floor, didn't quite work the way that we want. So, you know, one example is maybe process 3 up there took a little bit longer than we expected it to. Okay, well, we'll double it up. And we can just make the change in the conveyance foundation. Or maybe process 4 should actually come after process 5, not before. And so we wanted to swap process 4 and process 6. Well, that's okay. You can make the changes to the stop locations, make the changes for space, and just change it in software inside of a configurable tool. That's why our team really likes it. But what it was a primary enabler to something that we're really proud of. You know, we're all living in a COVID world right now, and there are a number of people who are trying to shift their businesses to help. And we were awarded a very major test kit manufacturing program. And one of the reasons that we were able to achieve that program and achieve success with our partner is that we were able to deploy a piece of automation in 14 weeks from project kickoff to manufacture of product on the other end. Something like that would normally take at minimum 40 weeks and likely closer to 50 in a regularly scheduled project. And the way that we were able to do that was based on the concept that I just showed you. The fact that we can take those lean cells and place them around a highly flexible foundation allowed us to pull resources from different areas of our businesses around the world and pull something together in record speed. More importantly than the deployment speed, though, is once we're over this short-term need for, you know, a high volume of test kits, the customer is able to take that system, reconfigure it, and then use it on one of their other product lines. So that redeployment value is very high. So we're really proud of this example, one, because we were able to do something that would be uncommon, you know, something that's normally developed in 40 weeks and 14. But more than that, we were able to solve a problem for our customer when they're looking to use technology to solve a very real problem and provide them that extended redeployment value. So I'll talk about one more example. And this one's about product mix. And so you still see that redeployment, but product mix is really high here. The repeatability needs of this product line were significant. And we were coming back to labor shortage here as well as a different area of the world. And this one's different because we solved this problem with a new technology inside of ATS. And something that we're just starting to discuss now at this trade show, which is our Symphony product line. And Symphony is about a different approach to motion synchronization. And we really talk about, you know, orchestrated motion. And that different approach to motion synchronization provides some really powerful results. And if you look at the why of Symphony, you know, why, I always start with why, it's able to generate some really high speeds with some extremely high flexibility. And in this particular solution, where again, we were sort of in medical device range, maybe a little bit on the outside of that, but it was about very gently handling a part at really high speeds because the material value is quite high. So we were able to hit very high speeds, very high precision and repeatability on a high material value, and provide our customer with that versatility and flexibility. And to just touch briefly on what and why and how we did that, Symphony is different because it's a configured tool, it's not custom automation. So we're pulling from a catalog, essentially, of components and foundational designs to be able to assemble around a flexible track, you know, similar to that redeployment example. And that plug-and-play approach was what enabled us to invest all of our time in what was unique about this problem. So when we were able to sort of pull from the catalog of standard, tested, validated, almost Lego blocks of automation, we could focus all of our creativity and all of our problem solving on the uniqueness of that very gentle handling of the more costly material and the requirements around repeatability for this specific application. So the three examples are really just meant to highlight the different things that you may want to look at when you're looking at your project, you have your end in mind, and that you're trying to build a case to go from wherever you are in that journey to wherever you want to go towards the finish line of technology implementation and automation. And one of the things I wanted to make clear is that when you're doing this and when you're going about creating the case to drive this change, make sure that you know you're not alone. There are companies like ATS, but even more than that, you can go and see all the different booths and different vendors who are there and have knowledge and specialized areas of expertise to be able to bring technology to your problem. So the important part is that process definition and those verification points and having a really clear understanding of what you're trying to do. And then you have so many people inside the automation community that are able to and very willing to help you. Thank you very much for joining me today. Up next is building the business case for automation, and some of the ideas that I seeded around ROI, we're going to expand on those in the next hour. So if you found any of this discussion interesting, I would really encourage you to stick around and join the next hour, because we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And then on top of that, this afternoon, because today is about scaling automation, I would really encourage you to join the partner sessions, because we've selected the ones that fit within the theme of the day that would really serve as one of that community of partners that could help you just basically anywhere along the journey of from zero to lights out. So I'll close by saying thank you very much again for joining us today, for attending this first ever ATS trade show. We're very excited and happy to be sharing some of the stories and some of the knowledge that we've been accumulating over the last 40 years of being in business and those 23,000 systems deployed. And really excited to take some questions from you now, hear about what might have resonated or maybe what didn't inside the presentation, and drive a good discussion.